Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Ninth House, chapters 24, 25, 26, and 27. Winter, 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 winter. In these chapters, we go to a prison and interview a potential suspect. But the most important thing is the fact that it looks like Darlington is really gone forever. There's also a horrific attack, but I'm more worried about Darlington. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. So much happens. I can't get over how much was packed into this section. I actually double-checked the page count because I was convinced I had to have been listening past a 50-page mark. And it's wild to me that this was all packed in here. So let's begin, and I'm going to really try and keep my pace up because there is so much to talk about, and I only have an hour. So, chapter 24. We've got Dawes making a tempest in a teapot because she is, that's her contribution to making sure that while the cameras continue working, that they only record static in the jail when Alex goes there with Detective Turner. So there's a potential to knock the power out, and I never thought of it until Turner said it, but yeah, we don't want to be in a jail when the power goes out, do we? That really does feel like a bad place to be. And we hear this, she mentioned something about St. Elmo's campaigning for a new tomb. Losing Rosenfeld Hall broke them. They've been petitioning for years, claiming all sorts of new applications for their magic, but without a nexus to build over, there's no point to a new tomb. And this sort of made me wonder, and I don't know enough about what they're capable of, but it just sort of raised my eyebrows a little bit that there is a house that might potentially be getting disbanded, and it doesn't look like they really are because there's not really going to be consequences, which is kind of the point of what's going on. But there's a group that wants a tomb, and there's a tomb that could have been up for grabs if things went a different way. And I'm just sort of keeping my eye on that. I don't know if that's anything. And Turner is like, why are the tombs even important? We're doing magic right now. And she says Lethe House magic is spell and object based. Borrowed enchantments. Very stable. We don't rely on rites. It's why we can keep the wards up. The other societies are trafficking with far more powerful forces, telling the future, communicating with the dead, altering matter. And I really appreciated this being mentioned because I think I forget how Lethe is just underpowered in comparison to everybody else, but also expected to keep them all in line. Later on, Alex is thinking about how the rules that the Ancient Eight have put in place are clearly there to guard the distribution of power, but not guard against using it in a way that's abusive. It's just, she says something like, the rules are to control access, not reduce harm. And that, I mean, it makes sense with Lethe, but once you start to get into, like, putting Lethe there as the stopgap for things to go too left, makes sense to keep them underpowered if you're like, well, we only need it to look like we've got rules in place and people looking out. But then once somebody really decides that they are going to fucking begin to take something seriously and really go for it, like it looks like is happening with Scroll and Key, I don't know if it feels like it's just really short-sighted, because then nobody can do anything unless they all work together to stop that one. And if they're that powerful, which we find out later, like basically Dean Sandow is like, they have a lot of strength and some really powerful people and could really fuck things up. Maybe nobody would stand against them anyway. It's just the fucking same old story. You don't put any checks and balances in place, and then shit goes absolutely left, and you're fucking surprised. Like, you know? Anyway. They go into the jail, no problem. Turner had to use that compact and go visit was Lance's attorney to like take his face and convince them he was him to come visit. And then they get inside and Lance is like, what the fuck are you doing here? And he gets really like aggro out of the gate until Turner is like, I saw that you teleported out of the jail. How about that? And that's the exact right way to take the wind out of his sails, because not only is it super secret that he can even do that, he got spotted by the fucking cop. Like, it's a worst case scenario, and he is really deflated by that. And he tries to say, you can't talk to me without my lawyer. And basically, in the end, it comes down to, dude, we're the only ones that maybe think that you didn't do this. So do you want to help us out and help yourself out? Or are you going to keep being fucking obstinate? And it turns out when they're like, why didn't, this comes up a little later, but I have to mention it now because it just cracked me up. Why did you go back to your apartment? He was like looking for money or some stuff to travel with, because you can't travel that far using these tabs. And when Alex is like, why didn't you just travel to the altar, the table, and then go wherever you wanted? He basically like slaps himself in the forehead and says, don't. Like, it never occurred to him. And I love it because it's such a moment where you're like, dude, what an idiot. And you feel kind of smug on Alex's behalf. But then in the car, she's still trying to say like, I don't think Colin would have had time. And Turner has to be like, dude, they can teleport, remember? And she just does the same thing that Lance does here. So I appreciated that, you know, as much as she is a smart cookie and thinks of things, not only does she not think of this, but she admits that maybe she's purposely not thinking of it because she's trying to come up with excuses as to why this kid Colin that she's actually grown to kind of like, she's like, maybe he's not involved. Maybe there's no way he could have been involved. And she's very honest with herself that that's what she's doing. And I appreciated that. She's just got a lot of self-awareness. Also, though, I appreciate, too, that this is the author kind of like in universe being like, look, I know you guys are going to ask why he didn't just teleport to the table and go wherever. And I'm just going to say it's because he's dumb. He's really stupid. That's why. And that's the explanation you're getting. And I'm like, I'm not mad at that. Honestly, because they are an idiot is not an out of line explanation for a lot of plot holes in things based on actual human behavior. So that's fine. So he has, if you didn't kill Tara, then someone did. And that someone is just waiting for us. And that someone is just waiting to lay hands on you too. Right now, you're a useful scapegoat, but for how long? And I really appreciated this. He's basically like, you've got a shelf life, sir. And you're thinking your worst case scenario, you're going away for a crime you didn't commit. And I'm here to tell you, it's maybe worse than that, actually. And finally, he says, Tara, started growing with Sveta, what's her last name? Sveta Myers. And she was just growing regular weed and working with this woman. And then when she mentions Blake Keeley, he calls him an asshole, and Alex didn't know how she felt finding common ground with Lance Grisang. So then he brings up the girl Katie, who comes in and is like asking if Tara can start growing something specific. And there's a very specific kind of climate that it needs, as we know. And the only question I have about this is if it was easy enough to cultivate in a specific greenhouse in the way that Tara does it with just a regular skill at gardening, why did they need her? Like, is Tara just supposed to be that gifted as a gardener? It just feels like the kind of thing where it doesn't sound like they gave her any magical tools for the job. It doesn't seem like they couldn't have made a greenhouse with the equivalent ability to foster this plant on their own if they decided to put their mind to it. I guess it's just like they didn't want the risk of it being close to home enough. Like Tara being the middleman keeps them a little safe. But anyway, Lance doesn't know what it does, the Merity. He takes it, nothing happens, he doesn't get buzzed, so he assumes it's worthless, and he's selling it to Blake, who keeps coming back for more. And when Alex is like, why did you think he wanted more of it if it didn't do anything? He's just like, I didn't know, but I was happy to fucking take his money. And I was like, that makes sense as well. And then he brings this other guy around who wants to know if we can get mushrooms. It was Colin Cottrey, wasn't it? From Scrolling Key. Yeah. Lance leaned back. The bravado had gone from him. He looked at the wall as if expecting to find some kind of answer there. The clock was ticking, but Alex and Turner stayed quiet. I didn't know what we were starting. Tara was at the greenhouses all the time, coming home late, staying up trying to mix shit, putting mushrooms together with I don't know what. She had this little yellow dish, called it her witch's cauldron. Colin couldn't get enough of the tabs she made. He kept coming back for more. Tabs? I thought you said you were dealing with mushrooms. Tara distilled that shit. It wasn't acid. I don't know what it was. And she asks Colin what it is, and he won't tell her. And she's like, all right, fine, then you're not getting any more. And she's pushing, and in Alex's mind, she's thinking about how Tara saw this thing was big. There was something about it that was really important. And this is a girl who has not had any power over her own life in a lot of ways, and is doing what she can to grab some power while there's an opportunity to do it. And yeah, it was risky, and yeah, it was not really advisable, but Alex really gets it and is not blaming her for it. She's not being like, oh, she was greedy. Alex is like, Colin was greedy. She was being used and demanding to be cut in a reasonable way, which they saw as greedy because she didn't know her place, is really what it comes down to. And finally, Colin caves, and he takes them to this room, and they do this ritual, and they wind up walking through a portal onto a mountaintop. And the next day they were super sick and they stank, but it was one of the wildest experiences of their entire lives. And he says, Tara wanted to see the world. I only wanted to fuck around. We went to the Amazon, Morocco, those hot pools in Iceland. We went to New Orleans for New Year's. It was like the best video game ever. Colin couldn't figure out how Tara was mixing the shit. He acted like he thought it was funny, but I could tell it pissed him off. Alex tried to reconcile this Colin, greedy, jealous, tripping with drug dealers, with the ambitious, perfectly groomed boy she'd seen at Bellbaum's house. Where had he thought this would end? And that's a question I have with a lot of things. People start shit and it's like they never think through as somebody who overthinks everything, the amount of thoughtless behavior that happens is incredible to me. And that is not to say that I am always super thoughtful. Like, I'll speak without thinking and say hurtful things. But speaking and doing are different. And when it comes to doing, I think a lot more. And like this kind of thing is just so high risk to begin with. Like, forget it. So also the fact that Colin can't figure out how Tara's mixing the shit. All I could think is you guys have access to some wild drugs. You can't make her tell you. And I don't know, like later on, because, you know, the Merity would ensure that she would tell. They would just come, like, you know, have her take it and then command her to say, what's your recipe? It would work. We know it would work. But my temptation is to be like, he didn't know she was growing Merity. But Alex's theory is he found out Blake was getting Merity because he saw a video, and that is how he found out that there was a link to somebody with a greenhouse. So he would know the Merity was out there and available. And I'm surprised he wouldn't have tried by force to get the recipe out of her. It just seems like, I mean, you know, I don't want to sound like a monster, but it's what I would have done. You're already a monster who is using people and letting a guy drug and rape girls. What is adding a bit to a girl's drink and having her tell you a recipe? Like, that's really not a big deal in comparison. So I don't know. But anyway, maybe he thinks that she'd be able to sense that it was in there. I don't know. I don't. So yeah, this is the part where the locksmith's magic had started to fail. The nexus between their tomb wasn't working anymore, and they were desperate for ways to open portals. And why is their nexus failing? Like, what happened? That's the question that I want to answer. Like, is somebody siphoning their magic away? Has somebody figured out a means to redirect it somewhere? Colin, bright, friendly, polished Colin, hadn't reported what Blake had been doing. He hadn't stopped him from hurting girls. Instead, he'd seized an opportunity for himself and his society. And I really appreciate this because Colin is like a likable guy. And even Alex, who really has her guard up all the time, has allowed herself to kind of like the guy. And that's how it goes so much. When women talk about not being able to trust men, it's a combination of the men who do the harm and the men who turn their back on the fact that they're doing harm. And those men who turn their back are honestly, in a lot of ways, the most dangerous, because they are the ones that enable everything to go as far as it does and for a person to continue for as long as they do. And then they gaslight people and cause like trauma that beyond just like whatever physically happened to them, but also the mental trauma of thinking like they're overreacting or nobody's going to believe them, or, you know, like maybe it didn't even happen. And that shit is, the person who is inflicting the harm is horrific for their actions in a way that feels like very, very direct, and it's easy to blame them for. But people who like stand aside and don't do anything to stop these monsters who do this stuff, there are so many of them that in a lot of ways they just sort of get hand waved as like, well, you know how people are. And it's like they never ever get held accountable for the fact that they stayed quiet and didn't stand up for somebody. If you were watching a fight and somebody getting beaten up and you were just standing there not helping, and somebody like took film of you just standing there and not doing anything, people would have a lot to say about the fact that you failed to step in. But when it's abuse, well, I wanted to mind my own business. It didn't have anything to do with me. You know, it's just fucking, and Colin being a likable guy, but being willing to sacrifice women, knowing what's happening to them so that he can do the thing he wants to do. That's reality. It's just too real. So, he, at this point, he looked impossibly mournful. You're going to help me, right? You're going to protect me? Turner stood. Keep your head down, Grisang. As long as you look like you're taking the fall, you should be safe in here. Alex expected Lance to protest, try to bargain, maybe even threaten them. Instead, he just sat there, his big body frozen like a stone idol beneath the fluorescent lights. He didn't say a word when Turner knocked on the door and the guard came to fetch them. didn't look up when they left. He'd been to the jungles of the Amazon, explored the markets of Marrakesh. He'd seen into the mysteries of the world, but the mysteries of the world had taken no notice of him. And after all of it, he'd still ended up here. The doors had closed, the portals too. Lance Grisang wasn't going anywhere. And that is so beautifully done. Like, just these people opening all of these doors for him, literally and figuratively. And having these experiences makes you feel like you're more important. But when you step back, nothing has actually changed. And you're just as disposable, as you ever were. They've let you in, but they've let you in for their own reasons, and they can take it away again. So at this point, Turner and Alex are just like, oh, God, who fucking knows? And Turner says, who do you like for this? And she says, I really don't know. All manuscript could be potentially, but if they needed Tara, why kill her? Like, they needed her. It doesn't make any sense. And then let's see. This is when Alex says, what would you say if I told you there's a ghost outside my dorm? And I love it. Turner says, honestly, with everything I've seen the past few days, I'd still think you were screwing with me. And I appreciate that about him. Good. Keep your guard up anyway. So we have her getting ready to go to the ritual to summon back Darlington. And her roommates are asking, like, they think she's going on a date and they're really excited for her. It's so sweet. Honestly, I'm so happy that she's like growing closer to these girls. And I hope that this continues. There's a point at which she's thinking about like people that she would do things for, and they come up, and it made me happy to know that like they matter enough to her to show up on the main list. Even if they're not involved with the Ancient Eight and Lethe and everything, they still like are top of her mind. It just makes me like Alex, that she cares about the women in her life like this. The men too, but you know what I'm saying. It's really women. So the whole atmosphere when they begin this ritual, because what they're doing is Dean Sandow is going to do a hound dog spell. And they basically use something to create a sort of spiritual scent for hound dog entities to sniff out which pocket world or realm he might be in. It's a really cool idea. I love this. And what they use to create the scent is the deed to Elm House. Is that the name of it? Whatever it is. His house, which, as we know, he is obsessed with and loves. And it's a perfect choice, really. So the atmosphere here is very sort of like lackadaisical. The girl, Michelle, who has been told to come and help, is really convinced that basically Darlington has always wanted excitement, and that he probably isn't even upset by what happened to him. He's excited that there was an accident that like mixed things up a little bit. Like there's a sense of almost he was bored and just wanted something to happen. There's like, I don't want to say they're saying he did it to himself, but they're acting like he probably liked it, in a way that felt kind of gross. And she says wherever he is, he's probably thrilled things finally got exciting. Sandow chuckled. I'll wager. Alex felt a stab of irritation. She didn't like Sandow and Michelle sharing a smile over Darlington. He deserved better. So it's very clear that at this point, nobody's really taking Lethe that seriously as she puts it, we are the shepherds. This is what Alex is starting to feel now that she understands what's at stake, and she's seeing the damage that can be done with this magic, but they don't take it seriously because evidently they haven't really seen it. As Sandow says later, I didn't want to see it, did I? And Michelle, I'm guessing, probably buries her head in the sand some, because she seems like a person who just straight up does not believe things if she doesn't want to. So they begin this casting. And at first what happens is that the room kind of comes alive with all of this electricity and light. And they see an old man who is definitely his grandfather being like, who left all the goddamn lights on? So it's like bringing back all of these echoes of things that had been and beings that had been. But Darlington isn't showing up, and this isn't really what they were trying to get to begin with. So Sandow is like, something is wrong, and they're ringing bells, and he tells them to stop. And things suddenly start to get actually, I was going to say things start to heat up. I don't mean that metaphorically. It gets hot, like she's sweating. And she is feeling this like rattling and realizes it's breathing. And whatever it is, compared to the crocodiles that she had seen in the afterlife, this is a lot bigger than that. The building shook. And then there's the scent of sulfur and somebody saying murder. And it's Darlington's voice, but deeper, snarling, angry. Murder, he said. And then she saw it. She thinks, well, shit, so much for him keeping his mouth shut. She thinks he's like about to tell on her. No, girl, this is not about you. And then she saw it looming over the circle as if there were no ceiling, no third story, no house at all. A monster. There was no other word for it. Horned and heavy-toothed, so big its hulking body blotted out the night sky. A boar, a ram, the rearing, segmented body of a scorpion. Her mind leapt from terror to terror, unable to make sense of it. Alex realized she was screaming. Everyone was screaming. The walls seemed lit by fire. She could feel the heat on her cheeks, searing the hair on her arms. So Sandow closes it down, manages to like pull it back. And absolutely everybody is flipping out. Alex is flipping out from what she's seen, but everyone else is flipping out because of what this means. And it takes a moment to explain it to her. He was eaten by a hell beast. It was talking with its voice, with his voice, which means it consumed him. Someone let it into our world, left it like a cave for him to walk into. If he's dead, then he should be on the other side. He isn't. He's gone, Alex. He's not on the other side. He's not behind the veil. He was devoured, soul and all. It's not a portal. That's what Darlington had said the night in the Rosenfeld basement, and now she knew what he had meant to say, what he had tried to say before that thing had taken him. It's not a portal. It's a mouth. Y'all, when I tell you I got goosebumps all over my entire body, oh my God, that is terrifying. That poor Darlington. Oh my God. Knowing what it is, looking at her for help, like, and I'm wondering if there is anything that she could have done. Genuinely. Could she have done anything at that point? Like, and it's wild because we heard the breathing, you know, like we know he heard this breathing rhythmic. It makes sense it was a mouth, but I'm just thinking there's a creature on the other side of the doorway, you know, not that this is its actual mouth that he walked into. Oh my God. And then they have to walk back out into the like kitchen where they have all this shit set up to welcome him back. This, I hated this so much. Here it is. When they entered the kitchen, Dawes began to cry harder. It all looked so impossibly stupid and hopeful. The half-full glasses of wine, the tidily arranged vegetables, the pot of soup waiting on the stove. Oh, that's so depressing. So this woman, Michelle, she is, their cars like got possessed. Basically, Darlington's car like drove into Amelia's Land Rover. So Michelle takes off. She tells Alex, I work in gifts and acquisitions at the Butler Library at Columbia if you need me. I'm very curious whether she will, if we'll see her again. Dawes doesn't want to go home. So the two of them both go back to Ilbastone. And Alex is trying to hold on to the idea that maybe they got it wrong. Maybe Sandow got it wrong on purpose. And she knows as she's saying it, this isn't what it was. Like, it would be nice if we could just say, oh, he's in on it and he did all, but it just doesn't feel like it fits anymore. And then when she says, what did he say, Dean Sandow, to stop the ritual? Hear the silence of an empty home. No one will be made welcome. The thought of Darlington being forever banned from Black Elm was horrible. Black Elm, that's the name of the place. And Alex says something on the prognostication night was pounding at the door right at the moment Tara was murdered, and it sounded just like tonight. Maybe it was Darlington and he saw what was happening to Tara and tried to warn me. Dawes is shaking her head. That thing ate him. He's gone. Sandow was wrong, though. Technically, someone could survive being consumed by a hell beast, just no one human. What could, then? A demon. All right, here's where I'm going to get a little bit crazy. Can we just have Darlington be a demon, then? We have these couple of dreams where he's like, first he's tripping and worshiping at Alex's feet. Then she's dreaming that he's got like black claws and a tail and shit, I think. Could it be? Like, can we just, I am as unwilling to let go of Darlington as Alex is, which is remarkable. Like, a writer being able to make me feel this way, desperately hanging on to the idea that he might still be alive instead of just being like, well, I guess that's done. That's a really difficult thing to do. I'm going to hang on to it. There's no reason to think this is anything, because how would that even fucking work? I don't know. I don't have to know. I'm not the writer. I'm just going to throw shit at the wall. So, they're about to have some pizza and some wine and commiserate in their grief. And then there's a knock at the door and somebody says, let me in. Alex's feet had carried her all the way to the base of the stairs before she realized it. Compulsion. Dawes, don't, she cried, but Dawes was already unlocking the door. I found this really interesting because the fact that when Alex used the star power, just saying something didn't immediately work. It seemed like the guys needed to turn around and see her before they noticed anything and were affected by her. So I think it's kind of interesting that Blake can speak through the door and it still affects them. And that is not to say it wouldn't have worked, because Alex doesn't like show up at the door and say, open the door and let me in. She charms her way in. I think because she underestimated how effective this stuff was, to be perfectly honest. So it's just, I guess, a fact of like, did she give a command that could be obeyed or disobeyed? A sort of yes or no question? No. So maybe the effect didn't seem quite the same. But either way, Dawes was thrown back against the banister, headphones flying from her hand. Alex heard a loud crack as her head connected with the wood. Y'all, I got real worried here. I really thought maybe Dawes is just out too. Like maybe this is it. So Alex, in a moment of genius, grabs Dawes' headphones, to keep out his voice so that she can't hear him and be affected by the compulsion. And as this is all happening, the house is freaking out around her. And just obviously, there are not a lot of protections in place. Everything that is in Il Baston to protect its inhabitants is to protect them from like supernatural kinds of assault, magic. It's not to stop an actual human being. And the one thing that I could say about that is like, it would be cool if there were a way of the house keeping any potion that somebody had taken from working once it crossed the threshold. But I'm going to guess that once something's inside a working body, it's kind of, that's it. And beside the fact that it's not like how they could probably set up wards to work this way, but they are doing a lot of magic inside of Stone that needs to work, you know, using potions and shit. So anyway, so Alex is listening to Morrissey because that's what Dawes have been listening to. And she is trying to find a weapon. And she looks over her shoulder and Blake is right there. And he's talking, but she can't hear him. But he knocks those headphones off of her head pretty quickly. Let's see. Calm down, Alex told the house. You're too old for this shit. But the house continued to whir and rattle. So he yanks the headphones off. He tells her to be still. She didn't just stop moving. She was glad to do it. Thrilled, really. She would be perfectly still. Still as a statue. Dawes, she screamed. Be quiet, said Blake. Alex clamped her lips shut. She was happy to have the chance to do this for him. He deserved it. He deserved everything. And he stands over her and just begins to break her ribs. And he says, what gave you the right? And she says, Mercy and every girl before her, they gave me the right. And he stomps on her chest. The lights went out, the stereo with it, the music fading. In the quiet, she heard Blake crying. His left hand was clenched in a fist as if ready to strike her, but the lights from the street lamps filtered through the windows, and they caught something silver on his other hand. A blade. Can you be quiet? He asked. Tell me you can be quiet. I can be quiet, said Alex. Blake giggled, that high-pitched giggle she remembered from the video. That's what Tara said, too. What did she say? Alex whispered. What did she do to make you mad? She thought she was better than all my other girls, but everyone gets the same from Blake. And this is a really weird moment because, like, she, later on, they're assuming he killed Tara. And I was like, listening to this, the audiobook, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like he killed her because he says everyone gets the same. That's not what every girl has gotten from him. That doesn't line up at all. And the whole, like, I don't know. I don't know. So then Dean Sandow shows up and gets roped into this. Basically, Blake just gives him the knife and says, stab her in the heart. And there's an interesting moment here. Alex was silent. He'd told her to be silent and she just wanted to make him happy. But her mind was mule kicking around her skull. And I was wondering, is Dean Sandow experiencing the same thing? Like, is he taking the knife and feeling on the one hand really pleased to be doing this kid a favor, but also deep in him, he's like, what the fuck am I doing? And Alex comes up with this moment, and it's such a good idea. Please, she begged the house silently. I am a daughter of Lethe, and the wolf is at the door. Send me my hounds. And she whistles. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't talking. And I'm like, technically, no, you're not. But he didn't say, don't talk. He said, be quiet. And that doesn't fit with be quiet. So it works and I'll allow it in a sense, but if he had said, don't speak, stop talking, this would have worked better. You know, it just doesn't quite. Saying, be quiet, and she clamps her lips shut, and then be quiet, can tell me you can be quiet. And she says, I can be quiet. Feels like there's a little wiggle room on these that doesn't seem like it should be there. The jackals burst through the front door in a snapping, snarling pack. And they attack, but she's in the mix here. And she gets bitten as well. She felt jaws clamp closed on her side and screamed as long teeth sank into her flesh. Sandow shouted a string of words she didn't understand, and Alex felt the jaws open, hot blood gushing from her. Her vision was turning black. The jackals retreated, slinking back toward the stairs. And Sandow is attempting to pick up his phone, but he basically passes out before he can get it in his hand, and fucking Blake is still here and still up. And I don't know, Dean Sandow, because he was about to pick up his phone, I am assuming that he got sort of kicked out of the compulsion, but because him stopping the jackal was a good thing. He probably saved Alex's life, but there was a part of me that was like, did he stop it because he knew he needed them gone to finish doing what he was told? Like, which way does this fall? He slams her head against the floor. He lifted her head, yanking on her hair, tilting her chin back. And then she hears a wet, heavy thud. And she turns around, and his head has been completely caved in on one side, because Dawes has a marble bust of Hiram Bingham III, patron saint of Lethe. And she smacked him in the head with it. And then she turns and she throws up, which, valid, completely understandable. I cannot tell you guys how glad I am this motherfucker is dead. Thank God. I swear. Ugh. So she wakes up in the hospital, and there is such a great moment here. At first, she sees the cops, and she's panicking. Like, oh, I'm going to jail. And then, what's your name, kiddo? Talk to me. Can you tell me what happened? You're all right now. You're all right. How gently they spoke to her. How gently they handled her. She heard Turner talking. She's a student, a freshman. Magic words. Yale falling over her. Shroud and shield. Take courage. No one is immortal. Such power in a few words. An incantation. I love this. Just the acknowledgement of she isn't used to being treated like this, The moment she sees cops, she sees enemies, and to find out that they're not seeing her that way is really jarring. So she starts to get up, and a nurse comes in, and it's the nurse that has handled the victima for the prognostication, which kind of freaks Alex out a little bit. And she feigns tiredness and asks for some juice to get this lady to leave. And then she goes and sees Dawes. And they've been here for at least a day, Dawes thinks. And Dawes says they're going to cover it all up, aren't they? Yeah. And Dawes is struggling with having killed someone, but Alex is like, dude, really, he was a really bad guy, a predator. She falls asleep, and when she wakes up, Dean Sandow is coming in with Turner being wheeled in because he's in a wheelchair. And they have this conversation. Alex is thinking about how all of us are in this room together for the first time since I've been here, and maybe things wouldn't have happened the way they did if we'd all just started out by actually talking to one another. I suppose I should begin with an apology, said Sandow. It's been a hard year, a hard couple of years. I wanted to keep that poor girl's death away from Lethe. If I had known about the Merity, the experiments with Scroll and Key, But I didn't want to ask, did I? The murder charges against Lance Grisang will be vacated, but he'll still face charge on dealing and possession. He and Tara were dealing psychotropics to Scroll and Key, possibly manuscript, and we had a look at Blake Keeley's phone. He mentions a bunch of stuff being deleted. She was threatening to, let's see, Tara found out what Meredy could do and what Blake was using it for. She was threatening to tell the police. I don't know if Blake was more afraid of blackmail or exposure, but there was no love lost between them. We've been interviewing a lot of Blake Keeley's friends and associates. He was not someone who liked women. He may have been escalating in some way or using drugs himself. His behavior lately has been truly bizarre. And Tara, when Alex is thinking about her, she's like, could he have possibly given her Meredy and made her see Lance's face as she died? Like, can Meredy do that? And I'm going to say, one, I don't think Meredy can do that. But two, why would he want her to see Lance's face? I mean, I guess to make her obey because she trusts Lance, but you could just make her obey because she's taken Meredy. Like, I don't really understand why that would be necessary. He doesn't know that there's going to be a witch going into Tara's dead body and seeing through her eyeballs her last moments, you know? So yeah, there's this moment where she says, like, he told me he didn't kill Tara. And everybody's like, well, how do you know? And I love Dawes stepping in and being like, is this the time to, like, get on her about her questioning him? Stop it. Blake may have believed in his own innocence, or he may not have remembered committing the crime if he was under the influence, or he may have been trying to please whoever was compelling him. Compulsion is complicated. I'm willing to believe that. That sounds like a reasonable sort of being compelled to do something and the many reasons why you'll feel like you should. I can see there being a lot of wiggle room in there. So let's see. I'm trying to find this moment here. We'll find out. I promise you that, Alex. I won't rest until it's done. Colin Crotchery has been questioned. It's clear he and Tara were experimenting heavily together with portal magic, money spells, very dangerous stuff. It's not apparent who was the instigator, but Tara wanted to go deeper and she wouldn't let Colin put on the brakes. And she was essentially extorting him. All of it is a disgrace, and all of it happening right beneath my nose. She was essentially extorting him. Like, I mean, yeah, but also come the fuck on. Like, it's just really trying to put everything at her feet in a way that is so disingenuous. And it just really pissed me off. And I wanted Alex to say something, but I understand, like, she's picking her battles in this moment. And Dawes steps in and says, so what does Alex get? She almost died twice because of this shit. And she has to be like 3 times. She should get something for it. And Turner basically at this point is like, I'm out. I don't need to hear you guys making fucking deals. I don't need to be here for that. I don't want to be here for that. But I will tell you, these assholes are like rich kids getting wasted and wrapping sports cars around trees. I'm glad no one ran you over, Alex. Try not to get your ass kicked for a week or 2. Which, honestly, she has almost died. And it's been like, what, 2 days? 3 days? Like, it might have been maybe like 5. It's been a lot of near deaths in a very short time. So Sandow tells her, I could get you to, like, the point that you're passing all of your classes. Which would be an enormous help and take a lot of pressure off. And Alex, she knew she should say no, that she should earn her way. It was what Darlington would do, what Dawes would do, probably what Mercy and Lauren would do. That's when she mentions them and I was touched. But Tara would say yes. Opportunity was opportunity. Alex could be honest next year. Still, Sandow had agreed too fast. What were the terms? And she says, so what's happening to everyone? And he says, fines. And she's like, fines? They tried to kill me multiple times, and Darlington is dead. They basically murdered him. And he's like, well, we're having a meeting in Manhattan, a meeting with a seating chart. Alex felt a wild anger building inside her. Tell me someone is going to pay for what they did. We'll see. We'll see? Sandow raised his head. His eyes were fierce, lit by the same fire she'd seen when he'd faced down a hell beast on a new moon night. You think I don't know what they're getting away with? You think I don't care? Merity being passed around like candy? Portal magic revealed to outsiders and used by one of them to attack a delegate of Lethe. Manuscript and scroll and key should both be stripped of their tombs. But Lethe won't act? Asked Dawes. And destroy 2 more of the Ancient 8? We are kept alive by their funding, and this isn't Aurelian or St. Elmo we're talking about. These are 2 of the strongest houses. Their alumni are incredibly powerful, and they're already lobbying for clemency. I don't get it, said Alex. You had to know something like this would happen eventually. Turner's right. You soup up the car, you hand them the keys. Why leave magic all this power to a bunch of kids? Youth is a wasting resource, Alex. The alumni need the societies. An entire network of contacts and cohorts depends on the magic they can access. This is why the alumni return here, why the trusts maintain the tombs. So no one pays. Dawes turned cold eyes on the dean. You should go. Sandow looked defeated as he wheeled himself into the hall. So then, to add another fucking punch to the gut, Dawes' sister is here to pick you up. You're leaving? Alex hadn't meant to sound so accusatory. I didn't know you had a sister. She lives in Westport. This is supposed to be a research job. It's too much. It really is, said Alex. If her mom's place had been a few train stops away instead of a few thousand miles, she wouldn't have minded curling up on the couch there for a week or 12. Be safe, Dawes. Watch lots of bad TV and just be normal for a while. Stay, Dawes protested. I want you to meet her. Alex made herself smile. Come see me before you go. I need to get some of that sweet, sweet Percocet before I collapse. And I don't want to wait for good Nurse Jean to wheel me away. And I believe that she does want to make her getaway really fast, but I also kind of wonder if she's like resistant to getting a little bit too attached to Dawes by meeting her family. There was a sense to me, I don't know, I might be reading into it too much, of just like, you have a way out. You're kind of one of the... She's from the world of Yale. She's, I don't know. I could see her realizing, like, we're not really in the same situation the way I think of us being. Sandow could make all of the apologies she wanted. Alex didn't feel safe. And she had to wonder if she'd ever feel safe again. We are the shepherds, but who would protect them from the wolves? Blake Keeley was dead and gone, but what was going to happen to Kate Masters and Manuscript? Who had unleashed Merity for the sake of saving a few dollars? What about Colin and the rest of Scroll and Key? What about the Glooma? She'd been nearly murdered by a golem in glasses and no one seemed to care. Dawes had been attacked. Dean Sandow had nearly bled out. Were they all really that expendable? Nothing was going to be dismantled. Nothing would change. There were too many powerful people who needed the magic that lived in New Haven, and that was tended by the Houses of the Vale. Now the investigation belonged to Sandow and to faceless groups of wealthy alumni who would dole out punishment or forgiveness as they saw fit. And this is something that I really appreciate, is like the nexus of magic being where they are. The fact that people who leave the school don't have the access they had when they were young, so they rely on the new people. Like, because I think I was asking that question about why more isn't happening out in the world when this magic is available. And it was because I didn't really understand how much it's dependent on where they're doing it. And now I want to know, like, New Haven can't be the only place with these nexuses. I'm going to say nexuses. But it can't be the only place, right? There's got to be other places that have these. Harvard? Brown? Princeton? Are we going to go with like the Ivy Leagues? That'd be fine. Yeah, I don't know. This is just a really fascinating way to build the need to keep up the school and the houses and whatnot. The disbanding physically would ruin the setup they've got going on to access the power, literal power that's like running through the ground. So she leaves and gets an Uber, and she gets out of the car and she runs into North, and he is looking concerned and coming toward her, and she uses words to send him away, and he looks like hurt. But she's just too fucking fed up with everybody to give a shit. Which, mood. I get it. Dawes could run off to Westport. Sandow could go home to his housekeeper and his incontinent Labrador. Turner, well, she didn't know who Turner went home to. His mother? A girlfriend? The job? Alex was going to do what any wounded animal would. She was going where the monsters couldn't reach her. She was going to ground. So I'm assuming this is the thing that had happened right before the start of the book, because the next chapter is early spring, and I think that's when that was set. And she had the blood, and she's talking about the hounds or the jackals. She like mentioned that. I'm pretty sure that when she's in the opening, she thinks no one's left, and it would make sense because Dawes is left physically. So that's kind of fun because like we're at what point? We're 86% of the way through the book. And I had fully expected that we would be 95% of the way through, and then we would get like one final chapter set back in the present. But this is happening a tiny bit earlier than I expected. So we're going to get a little bit more time in the present dealing with what's gone on than I was thinking we would. I'm going to check now. So let's see. This chapter 27, let's see, 28, sorry, starts at 396. And yeah, then 450 is like the beginning of the appendix, I guess you'd call it. So I will be finishing the book next episode. That'll be about 50 pages, just under 50 pages. Oh my God, you guys, you don't know how excited I am. But I am really dying. Like, Alex is going to be on the warpath now. She is going to be prepared to do what fucking needs to be done, I feel like. Yeah, we saw her being scared and holed up and licking her wounds and recovering and trying to, like, just hide. And that makes total sense. She should. But I feel like she is going to begin to gather, regroup. And it's going to be a rough time for the people who have gone up against her. And I don't mean that she's just going to win, but she's going to start putting some things in place, I think. If she's given the chance, God knows. But just like so much happened in these chapters, and the fact that nobody is going to pay, they're all going to get away with it. Like, this is fucking how it works, man. This is how it works. This is the thing that really kind of woke me up, was the whole concept of too big to fail and bailing out banks that had put themselves in the situation that they did by predatory lending, and we like saved them. It's not all made it out, but like mostly. And the realization that nobody got held accountable for that. You know, people lost money. That's the extent of it. Nobody was held accountable for what they did to other people. They just lost some of their personal assets. And that was really it. And that was the beginning of me being like, wait, what? Because I really thought something would happen. And it just didn't. And then as time has gone on, you look back at like, you know, political campaigns in the past and what derailed them and kept somebody from getting elected. And it were these minor things a lot of the time. These like somebody misspoke about something or a particular cartoon took hold or whatever. And it was minor and then it just ruined people. And now we have folks on tape talking about sexually assaulting people and they're getting elected president. Nobody fucking cares. And I just don't, it just really broke my brain to realize we have crossed a kind of threshold, and I don't know exactly when it happened, where people can do whatever they want very publicly. It used to be, well, we have to keep it hushed up and you will be disgraced if it gets out, but those in the know are going to be able to keep it out of the papers, so you should be fine. And now it's like it'll hit the papers, and so what? It'll hit the papers, and within 3 days, everybody will have forgotten all about it, which is like low-key how it works, actually. And I don't like admitting that because that means I forget about it, but like, honestly, there's too much to keep track of, so yeah. And we have like fucking, what's his name? George Santos out here. Every single thing about him, everything from his marriage to where he went to school to the fact that he was Jewish, allegedly, all of this stuff is all a lie. And yet he still gets to remain in office. The man ran on a campaign that was a complete fabrication from start to finish. And it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And that is a rough thing to live with in the world. Like I am somebody who really, the need for things to be fair is strong in me. And coming to terms with the fact that that is simply not only not the reality, but it is nowhere close to what most people care about. That's the part that has really shaken me and made me kind of be like, what are we doing? You know? So I really feel for Dawes because she just had more faith. Alex thought maybe something would happen because that was their job. But she was aware the way it tends to work usually. Dawes seemed to really believe, like, we'll figure it out and then people will be brought to justice, and finding out like it's just super duper not going to happen, girl. I think that has been a real, I want to say wake up call, but that doesn't feel like the right word, because wake up call for me, I always interpret as like the kind of thing that happens to remind you of what's important in your own life. Like it's always sort of a bad thing happened, but it had a good outcome on you. And this is not that. This is just a reality check, I guess is more appropriate. I don't know. But it's bleak, man. It really is bleak. And what I am sort of preoccupied by at this point is, how did Blake find out who Alex was? That's my primary concern. And I don't know if she's even asked that question. I can't remember. But he came to Ilbestone. And he's not part of the Ancient Eight, is he? I can't recall. Because I thought he like just found the Merity because he was already buying weed from Lance and Tara. And maybe he is part of the Ancient Eight, but like he came here and he knew to go straight for Alex. And the fact that he's got that knife, but he's like crying in the dark, it is just a weird moment that I was like, is he crying because he's like that self-pitying over what she did to him? Or is he being made to do this somehow? Like, the way he behaves, it feels like it's who he is. He's a fucking psycho, the way he's treating women. So going that extra step and beating the shit out of, and then going on to murder Alex, that doesn't feel totally out of character. But I just feel like something isn't adding up here, you know? And it feels like yet another sacrifice somebody is making of another person to try and load the blame onto. They figured out it wasn't Lance. Now who can we put in their sights? Okay, we'll make it Blake. And now Blake's dead, so that can be maintained. You know, we can keep that up because he's not available to question. I don't know. Man. I just feel like something's fishy about that. I wonder if we're going to like get an answer to the mystery by the end of this book, because I know there's like 3 so far. Or if that mystery just continues on. And I can't decide which like I prefer. Do I want to know already? I'm really enjoying things so far. So maybe, I don't know. All right. I got to wrap up. But thank you very much again to Joanna for commissioning this episode. Appreciate you a lot. Thank you to everybody who's listening. I hope you're enjoying the coverage. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.